Hey guys, I am going to be doing a video series where I read chapters from my book. This is called Blind Spies. It's available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle edition. I published this back in September of 2021. Sales haven't been great, unfortunately, but I want to get the word out there. I want to read to you guys. You can let me know what y'all think. So, Blind Spies, Chapter 1. Every day I'm going to read a new chapter to you guys. If you like it, share it, spread the word. Chapter 1, September 26, 1998. The lead character's name is David, so this chapter is from his perspective. David Vito grabbed a handful of tropical snack mix and ate it piece by piece, carefully working around the almonds. He despised almonds. Something about the texture when he bit into them just made his skin crawl. He popped a banana chip into his mouth and munched happily as he sent an almond flinging through the air. "Score," he said as it sailed into the wastebasket. He leaned back in his chair and kicked his feet up on his desk. This was the high life. He had worked his way to the top of this business. He took the classes, he did the research, he put in the elbow grease, he built the dream. He went from a lowly on the totem pole, running faxes and fetching coffees for the people who made too much money to be bothered with standing in line for their own beverages, to one of those very people that he himself used to wait on. My, how the tables had turned. Now he was sitting pretty in an office on the 5th floor of a high-rise that overlooked Biscayne Bay. He was smack dab in the middle of Miami's business district with a beautiful view of the Miami River. There was a tap at the door, and in walked the new secretary. She was a tall drink of water if he had ever seen one, about 5'7", with a small waist, wide hips, and a fat ass. He had only seen her a few times, but it seemed like she got more enticing each time he saw her. She wanted him. He knew it. She looked at him in that way that women look when they know what they want, but they don't want to come off as too forward or slutty. "Hey, Mr. Vito, I have those reports you asked for." She winked as she laid a file folder on his desk. "Thanks, sweetheart." She shifted her thick braid of black hair from one shoulder to the other as she turned to leave. David noticed a small purple butterfly tattooed on her back. In a way, she reminded him of Pocahontas, bronze-skinned and glowing. "Hey," he called right as she was about to push the door open. "What's your name again?" "Veronica," she answered, throwing a sexy smile over her shoulder. "I have work to get back to. Let me know if you need anything else." Vivacious Veronica, she would be good for a roll in the sack. David had had his fair share of secretaries over the years. There was Molly, the shy, mousy brunette who always kept her hair neatly knotted at the nape of her neck. She wasn't very shy the night that she let him fuck her on top of the copy machine at the library, though, legs spread wide, screaming harder. She was sexy in that way that only nerdy girls could be. Then there was Sheila. She was recently divorced and 10 years his senior. She taught him all kinds of things. Gave the best blowjob that he had ever had, right there under his desk as he attempted to look over the new gene therapy models that she had just printed off for his latest project. After Sheila, Kelsey entered the scene. She was a thin little blonde who was fresh out of college with a Bachelor of Science degree, a bright future ahead, and apparently a fetish for older men. Major daddy issues. He opened the folder that Veronica dropped off. It was full of scholarly articles that his biology students had just submitted for their midterm grades. He rolled his eyes and shut the folder, deciding that he would read over them later. Grading papers was by far the worst part of being a college professor. He would rather watch paint dry. David had no wife or children, but he had enough irons in the fire to keep him plenty busy. Sometimes he would smile at couples that he passed on the sidewalk and think for a moment that maybe that's what he wished that he had, but he couldn't be so sure. He had watched nearly every friend that he had in college grow up and do the whole wife and family thing. They looked happy enough, but he was more focused on work than he was with finding a woman. If it happened, it would happen by chance because he was too busy working at the biotech office by day and teaching classes at the University of Miami by night to actually get out there and look. He had needs, but there was always a secretary nearby that was more than happy to oblige him, and none of them had asked for any kind of commitment yet. The only real company that he had was Wasabi, his Sphinx cat, who wasn't much company because he spent most of his days sleeping, but David was fine with that. He glanced at his watch, 11:52, just enough time to grab a coffee and a quick bite before the biology seminar that he was set to speak at Miami Senior High. The high school was within walking distance, so he left his Maserati and his reserved spot at the office and opted to go on foot, stopping at a Starbucks for a venti caramel latte and a French cream horn along the way. He did this quite often, visiting high schools and basically recruiting kids to be a part of his next wave of students at the college. He wanted to get students excited about life, more specifically, the study of it. Maybe it was the way that he was raised that made science so intriguing to him. His father was a bioengineer for the government, and his mother was a veterinarian. Talk of molecular regeneration and equine science were regular conversational topics around the Vito dinner table when David was coming up. The many nights that he and his father had spent hovering over microscopes in their at-home chemistry lab, studying cell membranes, were some of his fondest memories. He knew then, at 9 years old, when he received his first science experiment kit for Christmas, that he wanted to learn more about life, about all the tiny parts that made everything whole, about how everything ticked together to make life possible. He thirsted for knowledge. He thrived on it. And that was why he was where he was today, making a grand total of $97,000 a year, mind you, in 1998, between the two career paths that he had laid out for himself. Life was good, very busy, but good, and not without a whole lot of hard work along the way. That's what he preached to these kids each time that he spoke at one of these seminars. When you pour your blood, sweat, and tears into something, it makes you appreciate it even more. David stood on the MSH gymnasium stage behind a thick velvet curtain, waiting for Principal Knox to introduce him. He had done this so many times, but for some reason, he still got the jitters every single time. Like the butterflies that tickle your stomach when you're free falling on a tall roller coaster, but with nausea and shaking hands added to it. He checked to be sure that nobody was looking and pulled the silver flask of brandy that he had brought along from his pocket. He took a long pull, immediately filling it like a flaming fist to the throat. Black, he grimaced, quickly covering his mouth, afraid that he may have attracted attention to himself, but luckily there was still nobody around. The peach flavor was the worst, but the liquor store was out of apple, and he needed something to quell his nerves. He heard Principal Knox come onto stage with his microphone. Hey now, students, settle down now, please. He was a short, roundish-shaped man with a chubby face and a dimpled chin. His head was slick, bald, and shiny, but he usually kept it covered with fedora hats to match every suit that he owned. David took a deep breath and tried to console himself. This was not the time to get the jitters. We have a very special guest that is here to speak to us today. I think that this group will appreciate what Mr. Vito has to share more than anyone. He graduated from the University of Miami, class of 1989. There, he earned a doctorate degree in physical and biological sciences. Let's have a listen to what he has to say. Everybody, let's welcome Dr. David Vito to the stage. The room exploded with applause as the red curtain swung open with much gusto. He took a nervous gulp and stepped forward as Mr. Knox handed him the microphone. Hey guys, how is everybody today? He could feel the hot stage lights already warming his face. He shielded his eyes to get a better picture of the crowd. The room was full of high school seniors who planned on majoring in biology fields in college, almost a full house. He took a deep breath before slipping into character and taking off. You couldn't be nervous up there. You had to sound excited about your career if you expected the next generation of students to follow your lead. Is anyone else out Is there anyone else out there who is just fascinated with life, like not just what we see on the outside, but what goes on the inside as well? He put a hand in the air to encourage them to do the same. Most of the room raised their hands, so he continued. For those who raised their hands, biology may be the perfect career path for you. I mean, something about the science field had to have intrigued you in order for you to choose elective classes in it, right? There were soft murmurs returned by the audience. The cool thing about choosing a biology degree is all the other branches that you can take depending on what interests you the most. It's a very versatile degree choice. Biological sciences cover all life. We study anatomy, cell composition in plants, animals, and humans, physiology, biophysics, and my personal favorite, biochemistry. In short, I study what we as humans are made of. We look at genes and heredity, probability. I was lucky enough to secure a position at one of the biggest biochem firms in Florida about 8 years ago. I started out as a voluntary intern my senior year of college, then worked my way up. The next step was learning how to conduct experiments. Then I started actually doing the gene experiments. Now I have an office job where I get to design the experiments that our firm conducts. It's a pretty cool job, and looking back on how I had to work to get where I'm at makes me appreciate it all the more. He spent the next 30 minutes talking about his job duties and all the necessary steps that he took to get the position. He had given this same speech countless of times at different high schools all over the state. It was kind of monotonous, but all part of the job. Teaching college was the same. He taught the same lessons to different students each year, hammering the same nail over and over again. At times it was boring, but he would never tell prospective students that. Despite the boring times, there was something comforting about the monotony. He always knew exactly what to expect each day when he arrived at work. He glanced at his watch as the students bid him adieu with applause. 1:45, just enough time to grab a shower before class. That's how David's life went. He lived by a strict schedule, always gauging everything by the watch that was strapped to his wrist. There was only so much time in a day, and his days were always planned and stretched thin. There was always just enough time to do this or that before his next task. Very rarely did he get the opportunity to just relax. His bank account looked good, but when did he ever have the time to actually enjoy that money? He knew he needed to make changes, but who had the time for that? Not when you lived a life like David's. He stepped onto the elevator that was in the parking garage attached to his apartment building and pressed number 3. He laid his head back and rolled it between his shoulders as the car clicked and clanged as it ascended the first 2 floors. It was an old building. The elevator had sounded like it was on life support for the whole 5 years that he had lived there, but it still got the job done, so the maintenance crew wasn't overly concerned about repairs. The elevator pulled itself to the last floor and seemed to let out a sigh of relief as the doors parted for David to exit. Wasabi was waiting for him on the other side of the door and immediately started weaving between his legs and nudging him in greeting as he entered the apartment. Another part of his life that he could always expect. He scratched him behind one of his hairless ears, just as happy to see his cat as the cat was to see him. His place wasn't too showy or great. Most people would have expected a more extravagant pad for someone who pulled in close to 6 figures a year, but he didn't need extravagance. For the most part, David lived a minimalist lifestyle. He had never been married and had only had a handful of serious girlfriends over the years, so he really didn't have anyone to impress. The flashiest thing that he had ever bought in his life was the 1998 Maserati 3200 GT that was sitting in the garage below. He had always dreamed of owning one, so last year when he was promoted to field director, he used his bonus to pay for it in full. He didn't go out digging for attention, but he had to admit that the second glances that he got when behind the wheel of that car made him feel pretty good about himself. He opened his closet, nothing but tan pants and button-down shirts of various colors and patterns, accompanied by ties to match each one. His shoes were all neatly lined up against the back of the closet, looking like a series of the same exact shoe but in different shades of black and brown leather. He chose a light pink shirt and a pink and purple striped tie, tan pants, and a pair of mahogany-colored Birkenstocks, then headed for the shower. He thought about the firm as he let the nearly boiling hot water cascade down his naked skin. There were talks about a new project that his boss, Mr. Rochester, was putting together. Nobody would know the details until the first of next month when they had their monthly board meeting. Supposedly, the project would require federal funding, so he was in the process of getting the finances secured before making any announcements. David washed his hair with the same shampoo that he always used, scrubbed his body with the same loofah and shower gel, and ran the same comb through his hair that he had been using for forever. But for some reason, he felt as if there was something hanging in the balance that wasn't quite so mundane. He could just feel it in his gut that big changes were definitely on the horizon, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't put his finger on the exact reason why. All right, and that's all of chapter 1. If you guys liked it, please share this video and comment below and tell me your thoughts. I'm going to be back tomorrow to read chapter 2. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.